You never know what's going to happen next. Could new allegations topple the Missouri governor? The Me Too campaign hits close to home, with local men now losing their jobs. KCI making history. Get ready for the first non-stop flights to Europe. The leader of one of the Metro's largest school districts calls it quits, and just as Governor Brownback announces hundreds of millions of dollars more for schools. Plus, why is one of the world's most trusted travel guides now listing Missouri on its top 10 list of places to avoid?
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Nick Haynes. Great to have you with us again. We could do a 2-hour show today and still not to get to grips with the massive amount of extraordinary news going on this week in this place we call home, but with a vow to be pithy, punchy and insightful so we can connect the dots on as many stories as we can. And the Kansas City Star's chief political correspondent, Brian Lowry, from Fox 4 News, morning news anchor Mark Alford, from behind the microphone at 98.1 KMBZ, Dana Wright, and from the editorial pages of the Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. It is now a national news story, in fact, one of the top stories on all the network news channels.
The sex scandal swirling around a rising Republican star.
The governor of Missouri is rejecting allegations of blackmail this morning.
About the time he announced his run for office,
I am a very proud husband and father.
He was cheating on his wife.
According to KMOV, the St. Louis TV station that broke the story, he invited his hairstylist to his basement one day to show her how to do a pull-up. He then allegedly tied her hands to rings with tape and put a blindfold on her. He's then accused of taking naked photos of the woman and telling her, "You're never going to mention my name, otherwise there will be pictures everywhere."
All this happened allegedly before Greitens became governor. He denies blackmailing the woman. So how does this impact his ability, first of all, to conduct the state's business as governor, Brian Lowry?
Well, I was in Jefferson City for the last 2 days, and it has hit him hard. You already have members of his own party who were asking the Attorney General for an investigation. The AG says he lacks jurisdiction, but the St. Louis prosecutor announced that she's beginning an investigation. So you now have a criminal inquiry into the governor. You have Democrats calling for him to resign. You have members of his own party aren't rushing to defend him. He already had a very fraught relationship with the legislature. And there's a number of lawmakers who are now seeing this is now the perfect time to cut the cord with Eric Greitens.
The governor's wife defending him, though, Dana Wright, saying this is a private matter between our family and God.
Yeah. You know, I feel bad for his wife, and I feel bad for his family, and she's asked to be left alone, and I think that they deserve to be left alone, the wife and certainly the children. The problem with this story is twofold. Are there other women out there? And I don't know that even his own people know the answer to that right now. And can he effectively lead moving forward with all of the noise in the background surrounding this affair? And I think the answer there is no.
There are calls now for him to resign, calls for impeachment. How seriously are those being taken, Dave Helling?
Well, very seriously by some legislators, some outside people. Whether they come to fruition or not is another matter entirely, Nick. We do need to keep separate the legal status for Governor Greitens, the investigation, the standard, what crime was committed, if any, what witnesses might come forward, if any, to corroborate this story. And so we'll keep an eye on that part of it, and that will play into the impeachment resignation argument. Then there's the political impact on his presidential aspirations, on his relations with other members of the legislature, both Republican and Democrat. His ability to lead is put into question, Nick, because in part he was so upright about his own sort of personal morality and made that a central part of his message. And now the admission that he was involved in this affair damages that credibility. So
okay, but infidelity by itself is not an illegal activity. Right. And some people are asking why now? Why didn't any of these things come up when he was running for governor?
That's a very good question. Why did this story not come out? I mean, Greitens joins a lot of world leaders throughout history who have had affairs. King David, a man after God's own heart, had an affair. He reconciled with his wife. They worked it out. There were repercussions. If this is simply an extramarital affair, that is the business between he and his wife. If it's more than that, that's the business between he and the voters and possibly the law.
A couple things. One of the problems with this story, there are many problems with this story, is how do you prove the blackmail arm of this story if there is no email, if there is no photographic evidence that she may have? I think it's very possible that every letter of this story is true, but proving that in a court of law is going to be difficult when it comes to the legal arm of this case. The other thing that is always just astounding to me, Nick, is why run in the first place? This is a man who had to have known, he's not stupid, he had to have known that other people knew and were angry that this had happened, chiefly her ex-husband. Yet they make the decision to run anyway on a family values platform, standing there knowing full well, I'm going to roll the dice and see if someone else talks about this. And you remember on the night of his election, I believe, the tweet started from the ex-husband calling him #homewrecker. So it's always amazing to me, anyone in the political arena that has this type of baggage so closely in their background a year ago, 2 years ago, decides, yeah, I'm going to run for governor.
One of the things that complicates this story is that the woman involved in the case, the alleged victim of the blackmail, has not spoken to the media. She was recorded surreptitiously by her ex-husband, who leaked this through his attorney to the media without her consent. So that really does complicate how much we actually find out as new things come out. She's not corroborated everything that her husband has said through his attorney. It really does complicate it. For the criminal investigation to move forward, you would need her cooperation. So I think that is one of the great question marks. Will we ever hear from this woman in her own words, not from a tape that was recorded without her knowledge, but will she ever talk in her own comfort and tell her side of the story rather than have it being filtered through her ex-husband?
This was supposed to be the week that Governor Greitens was getting attention for his State of the State address. In fact, it was also the week that Kansas Governor Sam Brownback was making his last big speech before lawmakers in Topeka. Was anyone paying attention to those, or did they get totally overshadowed by the most salacious news allegations involving the Missouri governor?
So let me address the biggest issue of the session, which is school finance. My budget recommendations includes an additional $600 million in funding over the next 5 years.
My team and I will lay out a detailed, thoughtful, and thorough plan to cut taxes on the hardest working families in our state. It is the boldest state tax reform in America.
Dana Wright, you're always a great barometer for me because you talk to listeners every single day for hours on end. Were they talking about those speeches, or was it the headlines relating to the governor?
You know, we were talking about Governor Greitens yesterday having an Anthony Weiner problem, not to that extent. But you remember when these stories started coming out about Anthony Weiner, he would try to talk about his tax program. He would try to talk about making his city better. No one wanted to talk about that, even if he did have a point to make or important things to say. That's the problem Eric Greitens has right now. Ask anyone, what did he say in the State of the State? They'll say, what? What State of the State? Is it true that he had her do a pull-up in his basement? I mean, that's what people remember. Ask anyone of our listeners, what did he say politically? They don't have a clue.
We didn't run one soundbite from the State of the State address from Governor Greitens, I believe, in our newscast. Not that it's not important, but when you have a certain amount of news time to fill, you know, the more salacious and possible criminal activity certainly gets the headlines.
Some people think the State of the State addresses can be very predictable. You see the applause lines. There's a lot of self-congratulation about how they've made the states great. There's applause, mainly from people from their own parties who stand up with standing ovations. Was there anything unexpected in any of those speeches, Brian Lowry?
Well, I would say in Governor Greitens' speech, no. He talked about tax cuts. He did not talk about the budget. But by the next morning, no one was talking about the State of the State. I think he had been planning to go on a tour around the state to promote his proposed tax cuts. Whether or not that happens in doubt. Brownback's speech, if to move it to the other state for a second, was a very, I'd say, strange speech in a lot of respects. One, the factoids that the governor chose to call out, one of them was that the quail population in Kansas is the highest it's been in 20 years. It looked like he was straining to find the positive news stories to highlight. And then he really infuriated Republicans. And so people did pay attention in Kansas to Brownback's speech. He came out asking for more education funding, but he won't say how he'll pay for it. Most of that funding would be after he leaves office.
It is interesting, though. So there we have a governor, Dave Helling, saying he wants to put in $600 million more money for public schools. What many people in the legislature said they wanted to see happen, and it seemed like everybody was complaining about him.
Not everyone. The Democrats were saying, let's, this is a good start. They want that money added more quickly, and the court may force them to add it more quickly. But it was the Republicans, as Brian points out, particularly Republican leadership, which is trying to thread the needle by, in essence, not doing anything on schools, but appearing to do something on schools to satisfy the court. And the governor blew that up by saying, no, let's do another $600 million over 5 years. Remember, the Governor Brownback speech came before the Greitens story, so it wasn't overshadowed at all. But there was a distraction, and the distraction is, who is the governor in the state of Kansas? Is it Sam Brownback or Jeff Collier? And so the speech was seen in that light in some ways, and that made Republicans even angrier. Here's a guy who's got one foot out the door, in essence blowing up their strategy and going to the other side. It was quite a week in both state capitals.
Now, last year on KCPT, we launched a big project called Public Works, examining our crumbling infrastructure. We are going to continue to check back on that issue. But it's interesting as President Trump gears up to make infrastructure a big part of his agenda for the upcoming year. What about our state governors who also face crumbling highways and bridges and big drops in their transportation budgets? I was just pouring through Sam Brownback and Eric Greitens' speeches this week, and no mention in either of them of the words road, bridges, or highways. Why, Brian?
Well, highway spending has been very complicated in both states for a number of years. Kansas has repeatedly swept its highway fund to help cover budget gaps. Even maintaining the current budget depends on some of those sweeps continuing. In Missouri, the road funding issue has been this thing that has been kicked down the road, to use the worst pun ever, kicked down the road for many years before I ever started working for the Star. And it's striking that the governor did not offer a vision on how to address that.
Quail got more mentions than infrastructure in the Kansas.
Quail, there was also, Kansas now has the largest milk drying facility in the United States.
Okay.
Couple of what were some other ones, Dave?
It was on purpose in Kansas, in part, Nick, because as Brian suggests, the transportation money will be needed for other things. In Missouri, you almost certainly have to raise taxes to do a road program. That would have to go to voters. The last thing Eric Greitens or any Republican wants to talk about this year is raising taxes, and so he just left it out. And as we said, I think last week on the show, that's a recipe in some ways for stalemate.
Well, I can think of one thing that Eric Greitens wants to talk about less than raising taxes.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
Well, it's called Kansas City International Airport, but there's little international about it. This week that changes. In fact, history being made as Kansas City officials announced KCI's first non-stop transatlantic flight. There's never been a non-stop flight to Europe coming out of KC. Now Iceland Air is touching down with direct flights from Kansas City to Iceland's capital, Reykjavik. Is this happening because of last November's vote approving a brand new single terminal, or is this decision completely independent of that?
Completely independent. It had nothing to do with us getting a new terminal, a single terminal airport out at KCI. It had to do with there's a market here of people who want to go to Europe, not necessarily Iceland. That's one of the catches. For $570, you can go round trip, but you have to stop in Iceland first for a short time, and then you can go on to another European nation.
Now, of all the places you could be going, Dana Wright, was that attractive to you?
We asked our listeners, where would you go? And I had to say, honestly, Iceland would not be in my top 8 or 9 or 10, but it's a start. It's a start. I think most people think, okay, if I want to go to Europe now, I have an easier way to do it. The tickets aren't that astronomical. I don't think it's a bad thing.
We're
but
going to go.
Agree.
My daughter went this summer.
Go?
My daughter went this summer and had a blast in Iceland, believe it or not. Yeah.
Now, I did notice in the fine print, though, Dave, this is not coming for free. The city is paying $500,000 to promote this over 2 years.
Be careful. It's not the city. It's the aviation department. It's not taxpayer money. It's money out at the airport raised through the way they raise money, ticket fees, parking fees, that type of thing. And they're also waiving, I think they're waiving landing fees for the airline, which is part of the incentive package that can be offered to carriers out at the airport. Mark is right. It doesn't have much to do with the new airport. In fact, there has to be there are renovations underway in the International Gate to make room for this this aircraft, and that's going to cost $12 million, which some people think is thrown away because they're going to build a new terminal. But there are incentive packages involved in this airline and potentially in others.
And this is
by the
nothing
aviation
new
department
either, Dave, because in 2014, Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta did the same thing, trying to get more international flights in, and it was successful.
Can I just say briefly, we're going to talk this weekend. I'm writing an editorial for the paper on the need for a regional airport authority to oversee operations of the new airport, because it's just in Kansas City, Missouri's hands. And one of the reasons is what Mark's talking about. Incentives for airlines are important, but they don't really get much oversight. It's just the airline, the managers of the airport handing it out. We think that there should be some civilian oversight of that money.
Well, speaking of travel, they are the world's biggest publisher of travel guides. Now, Folders is recommending that its readers avoid Missouri. Did you see that they've now added Missouri to their top 10 no-go travel places of 2018?
Missouri joins Cuba and Honduras on a list of international no-go destinations, the only state in the U.S. to be named.
It's upsetting. It really is.
The publisher cites the NAACP's travel warning for people of color. Incidents like the one outside of Kansas City last winter where 2 Indian men were gunned down on suspicion of being Muslim. And Senate Bill 43, a bill brought into law this past year that critics say make it harder to sue a workplace for discrimination.
So what has been the reaction, if any, from tourism leaders or government officials to this latest list, Brian?
Well, I think obviously we should note that one of the things that is bringing down Missouri's ranking actually happened in Kansas, which was the shooting in Olathe. But the thing that is really significant on there in terms of for policymakers in Jefferson City is the SB 43. This has been a bill that was passed last year, made changes to the anti-discrimination law, led to the NAACP's travel advisory, has put $500,000 in federal aid at risk, and there are a number of lawmakers who do want to revisit that bill. They wanted to do that before Fodor's got involved, but maybe this just becomes one more piece of ammo in that fight. Look, people are avoiding the state of Missouri now because of this new law.
Mark?
I don't think it's right, though, for a travel company, magazine, website, whatever like this to make a political statement and try to put some political arm pressure on someone or a state to change policy and put out an advisory like that. Yes, if the NAACP wants to put out an advisory, let that stand on its own. But for Fodor's or someone else to get in the game, it's just not right.
Now, it is only Missouri. That's the only state that they put on the list. And I did note also in the top 10, North Korea is not on there.
Oh, my God.
That's absolutely advisable. And you can go there, perhaps
Really?
even from KCI, Dave.
Maybe there's a nonstop in our future there.
Dennis Rodman
I
Airlines.
would point out that stories like this probably on the merits are a little overblown, but the reputation of the Midwest as a place where race is a problem continued this week. We had a state legislator in Kansas who said that, or told a crowd that tough marijuana laws were based on African Americans overreacting to the use of pot. Those kinds of statements are so hurtful and so difficult for the reputation of the Kansas-Missouri area, and the Fodor story played into a little bit of that.
But those come with accountability. That lawmaker involved there did lose his committee
post.
He resigned.
Yes, okay.
Let's not mention his last name.
He's still
no relationship to me.
Gosh.
No.
Okay. Wyandotte County gets a new mayor this week. 2 months after his surprise election, David Alvey is now on the job.
People resent when you try to present things as being better than they really are, because it all comes down to credibility. I'm not afraid to tell people what the situation is as I see it. Sometimes we focus so much on big development that we lose sight of the fact that people live in neighborhoods. And what is their experience of their neighborhood? And if the experience of their neighborhood is it's decaying, it's being neglected, then we're not going to retain residents, and they will not be encouraged. There will not be credibility.
David Alvey replacing Mark Holland as Wyandotte County Mayor. Holland, by the way, isn't the only big visible name departing Wyandotte County this week. So is the longtime superintendent of the Kansas City, Kansas School District, Cynthia Lane, announcing she's departing as the head of the fourth largest school district in our metro. Is it all the uncertainty over funding in Kansas that pushed her to the exit door? Is there something else in play, Brian?
Well, I don't know why she's making the decision other than, you know, she's been in the job a while and she seems ready to retire. But I will say this is going to have a statewide impact.
Why?
Few people have shaped the education debate in Kansas more than Cynthia Lane. She is she's been the leader of one of the school districts that is a plaintiff in the ongoing school finance case. She has been heavily involved in the negotiations over school funding in recent years. She's really been someone who, if those people out there, and there's a lot of them in Kansas who think schools need more money, she's been one of the main people in that fight. She may not be as well known as some of the lawmakers, or certainly not Governor Brownback, but for people who follow Kansas education, this is a big, big change. Losing her voice, which was one of, I think, most powerful voices when she would come to the Capitol.
She may be the last time I will be saying the words long-serving superintendent in the Metro, too, because they seem to have a very short shelf life anymore. There's a huge turnover in superintendents, Mark.
There really is, and it's kind of hard to put your finger on why. There's a lot of turmoil and disturbances within certain school districts in the Metro, and we haven't had long-serving superintendents. We have a very good one now in the Kansas City, Missouri public schools, but I think in the 20 years that I've been here, we've had, 12 or 13 superintendents. Stability is based for a school district on leadership, and unless you have stable leadership, which can then promulgate ideas and build influence and trust, you're not going to have a great education system.
I would just add quickly that one of the reasons superintendents struggle so much is we expect so much from our public schools. We expect test scores to rise and performance to improve, and yet education remains the subject of forces outside of the control of the superintendent. Home situations, poverty, employment. The superintendents can't control that, and so they're judged against a standard in which they don't have complete control of the outcome, and that's a recipe for burnout, and that's what we think, I think we see in a lot of urban areas.
Another big name in Wyandotte County also out this week, the former longtime Wyandotte County District Attorney Jerome Gorman, who recently lost re-election, now removed from his new job as an attorney with the Kansas Department of Revenue. That after allegations he harassed female workers. Meanwhile, Ronnie Burt, the head of Visit KC, also resigned this week after allegations he harassed female members of staff in the city's top tourism office. The Me Too campaign has by and large been a national phenomenon. Is it now finally hitting our own backyard, Dana Wright?
It's forcing an important conversation, Nick, and I think everyone is looking into their past, their behavior. I think women are looking into their past and thinking, when this happened to me, not if, by the way, when this has happened to me, because we all have stories. How did I react 20 years ago? How did I react 10 years ago? And how would I react today? What do I tell my daughters to do today that I maybe would not have done when I was their age? I've been really surprised and disappointed at the number of people who will call into our program and say, well, how do you know? How do you know this happened?
Yeah.
Can you prove it? You know, that's the problem with sexual harassment. It's usually done behind closed doors and with people in positions of authority and secret buttons under their table. And I've been disappointed at that arm of the conversation, but I think we have to keep talking about it to change the culture.
I will say, as I'm one of 4 men in the household. I have 3 brothers, and I grew up with, I didn't have any sisters. I have a lovely wife, but I did not know that this situation was this pervasive. And I feel bad for that. I feel ignorant. I have a daughter who I think has dealt with this up in New York City to some degree, and she shared some of it, but I did not know it was this pervasive. I'm glad this is coming out, that we can get a handle on it as a society and help heal each other.
And we can expect shoes to drop in our state capitals, Brian?
Well, I mean, you look at, this is just actually the second state official who has been outed by Tim Carpenter of the Topeka Capital Journal in a very short amount of time. There was also a high-ranking former official at the Kansas Department for Disability and Aging Services. You're starting to see an impact at the state agencies. We're seeing people be more willing to come forward and talk about the behavior of lawmakers. It has definitely sparked a conversation in Topeka. The legislature is in the process of reviewing some recommendations from the Women's Foundation about adopting stronger policies on sexual harassment. So this is all leading to reform. It is leading to change. The change is often very difficult and painful to achieve.
And finally this week, we pay tribute to one of our own. Former Kansas City Star Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Mike McGraw died this week of bladder cancer. He was 69. For the last 3 years, he's been a fixture here at KCPT, a special projects reporter in our Hale Center for Journalism. He worked on a number of investigations, from how the Kansas City Water Department was losing a third of the water going through its pipes to re-examining the 1988 explosion that caused the deaths of 6 Kansas City firefighters.
There was no video, there was no DNA, there were no fingerprints or tracks in the mud or anything. No one knows what happened. I can't let it go because there are clear problems with the case that aren't being acted on, and I wish I knew why. I am by no means the only person in town who thinks that there are problems with this case.
Mike, you will be missed. Dave Helling, you knew him too.
Oh, he was a brilliant man and friendly, personable, aggressive. He was the best of our business, the very best. And you're right, Nick, he'll be missed.
And that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from the Fox 4 Morning News team, anchor Mark Alford, and from the editorial team of the Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. 50% of Dana and Park, weekdays 2 to 6 on 98.1 KMBZ Dana Wright, and the Star's Brian Lowry. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.